5. She was a striking-looking girl, yet somehow had a quality of innocence. A beautiful mane of hair hung carelessly past her shoulders. She had gorgeous eyes, a petite but well-rounded body, dainty movements, and a very quick, shy laugh. Somewhere today this girl, let's call her Jane Robertson, which is not her real name, is trying to put together a life that was almost ruined. She was not a model, not a singer, not an actress, just a giggly little girl who didn't smoke, didn't drink. If she had a vice, it was one that she shared with millions of women. A total infatuation with Elvis Presley. On most occasions when Elvis played the Sahara Club Casino in Lake Tahoe, Jane and her mother would come in to see the show. One night, in the spring of 1971, her fidelity as an Elvis fan paid off beyond her wildest dreams. She was singled out of the audience by Elvis to be his companion. Just as simple and breathtakingly unbelievable as that. It was Elvis's last number. He looked stunning that night. A 36-year-old Adonis, arrogantly standing in the spotlight, orchestrating the audience with a tiny flicker of his bejeweled fingers. His mouth was sensuously pouting the words of his closing noom. "Brr, I can't help falling in love with you." And, as usual, middle-aged women who should have known better were swooning like teeny boppers in front of their portly husbands. In the second row of the packed audience sat Jane, totally mesmerized. As always, when Presley stood on stage. As Presley got halfway through his number, he whipped the sweat-soaked scarf from around his neck, kissed it and threw it into the audience. Women charged like Oakland Raiders linebackers, knocking over tables to the sound of broken cocktail glasses. Presley added to the pandemonium by reaching back into the band and producing more scarves. He would mop his forehead, kiss the scarf, and float it into the audience. The pandemonium that followed was unbelievable, as middle-aged ladies waged tug-of-war battles over scarves with the man's perspiration on it. Jane just sat there in the second row, sighing. She did not get a scarf that night, but she did get something else. Some very admiring glances from Elvis Presley. Every time he came to the edge of the stage, he would turn and wink at her. Jane was flabbergasted, but she didn't read too much into it. Why would he be attracted to her, with all his women? As the show ended, Jane almost thought she saw Presley half wave to her. Impossible. She was drained of emotion. The show was over. It had been fantastic. Now for a night sleeping in the car before beginning the long trip home. Elvis was not the only one giving her the eye that evening. From offstage she received some very admiring glances from bodyguard Sonny West, a man not unused to the beauty of ladies at an Elvis performance. Also backstage with Sonny was Joe Esposito. Esposito, along with Dave Hebler, was one of the few non-Southerners in Elvis's entourage. Esposito was a fast-witted man from Chicago who had a reputation of being able to get things done quickly and smoothly. A taste for sharp clothes and a passion for diamonds caused the Memphis boys to call him Diamond Joe, a name that Esposito seemed to revel in. Esposito had met Elvis in the army and had been with him on and off ever since. He had a keen eye for anything that would please his boss and, for his trouble, was the first member of the Presley entourage to be put on the regular payroll. He was Presley's most valued aide-de-camp. What Joe and Sonny were looking at in Jane Robertson was something that sure would please their boss. She simply used beauty and self-conscious sex appeal. Not an ounce of makeup or lipstick on her face. She was really something else. As the show finished to thunderous applause and long, loud squeals, Sonny and Joe raced around to where Presley would leave the stage. The three of them got into the elevator that would take them to the master dressing rooms in the basement. Presley was drenched with perspiration and his chest was heaving. He had put every ounce of energy into the show. "Good show, said Sonny. "You really turned him on." Elvis nodded thanks, but his mind was somewhere else. "Goddamn, man. Did you see that gal sitting there in the front of the audience? Hell, that was some good-looking piece of woman. Who is she?" She was beautiful. Sonny and Joe were not surprised he had spotted her. Normally it's almost impossible to see an audience from a spotlit stage, but when Elvis had gone to the edge to throw out his scarves, he had been able to see for the first 3 or so rows. "Yup," said Sonny with a big smile, as he helped his boss off with a gleaming, sequined white jumpsuit. "I know the one you're talking about, a real honey." Sonny didn't need any pictures drawn for him. He dashed upstairs as the dinner crowd was still recovering from their hysteria and zeroed in on Jane Robertson. "Hi, hon," Sonny said. "Do you want to meet Elvis? I'm Sonny West and I work security for Mr. Presley. I would be very happy to introduce you to him." The response was to be expected. "Oh, come on," replied Jane, not unfamiliar with lines used by men on the make. "You're kidding me." Sonny flashed a big charming smile. "Nope, hon. Here's my identification. I work for Mr. Presley. I would be very happy to introduce you. Come on. He's upstairs in his room. I'll take you all right on up." Elvis was in the inner dressing room changing. So Sonny introduced her around. She exchanged small talk with Sonny and Joe on how much she'd enjoyed the show. She told them she had been an Elvis fan ever since she could remember being able to listen to music. She laughed and giggled shyly. Then Elvis materialized from the inner dressing room, and Sonny thought Jane was going to collapse. She had this great laugh, a beautiful shy personality. Boy, she was a looker. When meeting a new girl, Elvis very rarely changes his line. He comes on very quiet, very attentive, very considerate. He turns on the little, old, country boy act like a tap, and the girls fall like chopped down oaks. Even if Elvis wasn't who he was, say he was just an old truck driver, says Sonny, when he turns on that country boy charm, he could romance the Queen of England. Not surprisingly, Jane stayed in Elvis's suite that night. Her mother would make the trip home alone. Elvis really dug her, says Sonny. He saw a lot of her during that engagement. Bought her some clothes and stuff. Not that she wanted them. She just wanted to be close to Elvis. But in a short while, Jane began to change in an ever so small way. Elvis started to give her a couple of pills here and there to give her a lift. Not that she needed it, but I guess she just didn't want to look like a hick or a square. She was taking things with Elvis, and I know she had never taken anything before, says Sonny. The night that Sonny would like to forget, Elvis, Sonny, and Charlie Hodge took Jane on a trip to the Presley home in Chino Canyon Road, Palm Springs. When they arrived, Elvis was feeling like getting out of it. He had taken his usual dose of pills during the day, but as bedtime came around, about 3 in the morning, Elvis produced a bottle of prescription Hicadin, normally prescribed by doctors for severe cases of coughing and congestion. Hicadin in large quantities is a dangerous narcotic. Elvis would get out of his gourd on that stuff. Sonny recalls, I've tasted it. Yuck. That night Jane took a little swig. More giggles. Toward 4 a.m., the two of them were nodding off, giggling, stumbling and slurring their words in happy unison. Then they went to bed. The swigging of the Hicadin continued. The two of them could be heard giggling and laughing inside the master bedroom. The next day, Sonny had planned to force Elvis to take some sun. He was awful white looking, so we wanted him to get a tan to make himself look healthier. The entourage woke around 11 in the morning. Sonny and Charlie read the papers, waiting for their boss to rise from his heavy night. Noon came and went, recalls Sonny. Normally someone would have taken up his breakfast, but this day they didn't, and it's now getting on for 1 o'clock. I casually asked whether anybody had checked on Elvis. The point is that the fear of him taking an overdose is never far from our minds. Although he is very skillful when it comes to measuring out drugs, he knows those drugs better than a doctor. But on this morning he had miscalculated. Sonny wandered back to the master bedroom to check. He went through the first door and then banged on the second door, which opened into Presley's suite. You getting up, boss? What do you want for breakfast? I'll fix it. Silence. Hey, Elvis. Boss, you there? No answer. Sonny's heart started to pump. Jesus. He opened the door. Elvis was sprawled across the bed sideways. Inside the bedroom, the temperature is way down. It's freezing. He would keep the room temperature down so low you could hardly stand it. Sonny ladies. I dashed over to Elvis. Boss, boss, boss. Come on, Sonny was screaming. Snap out of it. Boss, boss. He recalls that Elvis was taking long, deep breaths about 5 seconds apart. Sonny crawled across the bed to where Jane was lying naked under the bedclothes. Jane, hon. Come on, let's get up. Come on. Sonny will never forget what he felt then. Oh, man. This was it. The whole trip was over. I was sure that they had both bought it. I opened Jane's eyes. They were staring straight ahead like glass marbles. And there was that terrible gasp. She wasn't breathing properly. It was like a long, strangled half, groan, half, gasp. I then opened her eyelids again, and they were blank. I slapped her across the face, hard, a couple of times, but no reaction. Christ, I was scared. I yelled out to Charlie Hodge, Charlie, you better get a doctor here quick. Elvis and his gal here are out of it real bad. 99. Within minutes, a doctor, whom we will call X, arrived at the house on Chino Canyon Road. By this time, Elvis had started to come around. Dr. X took one look at the girl, checked her pulse, her breathing and her eyes, and said, we've got to get an ambulance up here. This girl is dying. We can't waste any time. Elvis was still staggering around like a drunken sailor. He told the doctor, come on, doc, she'll be okay. Just give her a shot of Ritalin. I'm telling you she'll be okay. Sonny was getting exasperated. Here they had a girl dying on their hands, and Elvis is telling the doctor what to do. Man, I was hot. I could have smacked him right in the mouth. Damn fool telling the doctor his business. Dr. X was obviously extremely concerned. Elvis started to argue with him. It's just too much Hicadin. That's all. She was drinking the damn stuff like water. Just give her a shot of Ritalin and she's gonna be okay. Dr. X cut him short. No, We're getting her in an ambulance and straight to emergency." Within minutes the ambulance sped to the house. Charlie Hodge and Sonny followed the ambulance to the hospital. They pumped her stomach, hooked her up to machinery and everything, says Sonny. Charlie Hodge looked at her, glanced back to Sonny and said, "Man, she looks like she ain't gonna make it." Sonny looked at the ground, and for a moment he thought he was going to cry. Dr. X came across to them. "This girl is in bad shape. I'll be honest. I can't promise anything. Why don't you go back to the house, and I will call you if there is any change." Sonny and Charlie drove home in silence. Elvis was beginning to snap out of it. He had popped some Ritalin. "Any change?" he said in a flat monotone. "No," said Sonny gravely. Charlie chipped in. "The doctor doesn't know if she is gonna live or die." Elvis frowned. "I told that girl not to drink that much. She was whacked." He then went into the bedroom to make an important telephone call. Sonny was getting angry. Here was a girl dying on them, and within seconds Elvis was telling everybody it had nothing to do with him. "I don't care how he cuts it," said Sonny. "It was his bottle of drugs. That little girl had never even touched a glass of champagne, and now because of him, she's battling for her life in the hospital, and all he can do is tell the doctor what to do and then tell us it is all her fault. Goddamn. He is a son of a bitch." At about 7 that night, Charlie Hodge got the call from Dr. X. "She is starting to come out of it. She just might be okay. I can't promise anything, but we're doing our best," he told Charlie. "Why don't you drop by the hospital?" Charlie and Sonny jumped into the car and were there within minutes. "We went into the intensive care unit," Sonny recalls. "There were 4 or 5 beds in there. Jane was the only patient. She looked awful. Her eyes were closed. I think she is going to be okay," Dr. X said. "It looks like she is coming out of it. She is going to live." Sonny's skin crawls when he thinks of what happened next. He went across to her and touched her arm. "Jane," he whispered softly. She opened her eyes and suddenly, Sonny remembers, she came off that bed like a wild animal. She was hissing like a goddamn mountain lion, snarling like a wild beast. HHHHHSHHHHH. Like that. "Wow." I got scared. Sonny threw an alarmed glance at Dr. X, who explained, "She doesn't know where she is. Is she okay?" Sonny asked, "Is she gonna be okay?" "Well," said the doctor, "we don't know how she is affected by it. We don't know how much oxygen was stopped. We can just do our best and hope." Jesus, thought Sonny. What if this little girl is turned into a vegetable just because of some crazy stunt back there in Chino Canyon? As Sonny and Charlie left the hospital, Sonny remembers that Jane was still having trouble breathing. She needed oxygen. Elvis was sitting in the lounge room of a Chino Canyon home. "She's gonna be alright, I think," Sonny said sullenly. "But she just might never be the same again. She was hissing at me like a damn cat. She didn't recognize me." Elvis was off again on his own trip. All he said was "man." Sonny doesn't remember his ever making a telephone call to Jane, ever visiting her or even acknowledging her existence for a long time. Someone else was doing the worrying. The person to whom Elvis had made the important telephone call was a man he often turned to at a time of trouble. Elvis always turned to him when he got involved in something he couldn't handle. Sonny remembers, the hospital bill was paid for. She was flown back home. There wasn't a whisper about it in the press. The newspapers would have had a party with that one. Later on, someone brought up the fact that there might be a lawsuit brought by the girl or her mother. Joe Esposito was instructed to give her some money. The mother, bless her, wouldn't accept it. I think Joe ended up by giving them something. But the girl and the mother didn't want anything. They didn't sue or anything like that. They were real great people. The point was because Elvis had this image of being so anti-drug, the girl and the mother didn't want to destroy that image. That girl, Jane, she loved Elvis. Man, do you know, I believe that even if her daughter had died, the mother still would have kept her mouth shut. Jane did call Elvis later that year. He spoke to her briefly and he told her, according to Sonny, "Hon, when you get a little bit better, I'll take you on tour." But Sonny relates, she was out. Elvis didn't want to face the situation. Sonny saw Jane again. She and her mother had driven to Las Vegas to catch Elvis's show. He met her mother, too. They were sleeping in their car because they couldn't afford a room in the hotel. Joe Esposito found out about it, picked up the tab, and put them up in a guest room at the Hilton. When I spoke to her, she had tears in her eyes. "Sonny, don't you know I don't hold it against him? He didn't do anything. It was all my fault." There she was taking the rap for the whole thing. He did get her to drink it. He was the king. Anyone would do anything to please him. Then Sonny grows sad. Man, it was all over for that little girl. Her face never lit up anymore. Whatever happened back there to her when she overdosed, it had affected her whole personality. She was a different person. There wasn't that shy giggle, that easy laugh anymore. She seemed to be deep and quiet and introverted. I'm no doctor, but that experience just turned her completely around. And yet all she could talk about was Elvis. There was a genuine love there. I never heard Elvis talk about her again. By 1971, Elvis was a changed guy. He was no longer the shy, fun, loving kid from Memphis. No, he was just living for himself and all that damn junk he took. He was like a walking drugstore.